Well, hello, everyone. It is that Weems guy, and we're here today with Ed Monk. And Ed has just published a book called The First 30 Seconds, or First 30 Seconds, about the active killer. Uh, I don't know if we want to call it a phenomenon or because it's not really a phenomenon, whatever you would call it. Ed, if you would introduce yourselves.
Hi, Lee. Thanks for having me on again. My name is Ed Monk. I live in Whitehall, Arkansas, which is about 30 miles south of Little Rock. I own Last Resort Training and Consulting and Firearms Training Facility here with my brother. I'm a retired Army officer. I'm a former school teacher, firearms trainer, and a part-time police officer.
All right. So you actually have three really good box check to study this phenomenon. You're not only were you an Army officer, a West Point graduate Army officer, uh, school teacher and law enforcement. So you can actually talk on every side of the perspective here.
Well, it does give me perspectives as I've studied it for 17 years. And when I first got into it, I didn't think my military career had really anything to do with it because we never got trained on active shooters
Right.
really. But the longer I go, the more I realize how I approach something and how I look at it. Now I even include in my presentations, and it's in the book, how the Army prepares to fight a potential future enemy. Is we ought to bring that system to the active shooter, and we're not doing that, and that's one of our problems. And this was at TACCON now, and you know who the guy is, but I don't want to say his name. But he he came in a little bit late to my presentation, so he missed my introduction. So I'm pretty sure it was a 4 hour active shooter presentation. And we got done. He came up to me and he said, "You're in the military, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're which branch?" I said, "Army." He goes, "You were an officer, weren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You went to Commander General Staff College, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I thought so." Because of the way I packaged the
Right.
I didn't think it had anything to do with it, but it does.
Yeah. Oh, I would think that it's threat analysis is what it is. That guy. We have a problem. We might have to fight a battle over here. What are our contingencies for this battle?
Yeah, and knowing the enemy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like boxing. I mean, you can just get in the ring and do your best, or you can study the guy and what his, he cannot take a left hook. He cannot take a left hook, so I'm going to build
Right.
that in. But he's got one hell of an uppercut, so I'm going to have to guard against that. It's
Right.
instead of just having a cookie cutter response, we what we haven't been doing is studying the enemy,
Hmm.
identifying his weaknesses that we can use against him, identify his strengths that we have to guard against, what weapons he'll have, what are his skill levels on the weapon systems, what is he going to do when he starts the attack, what is he going to do when we make contact with it. We're not doing that. And how, just take schools for instance. The shooting at a middle school versus a high school versus an elementary school are drastically different. But
Hmm.
every school I've been to, it just has a cookie cutter. Every campus does the same thing, and that's not optimizing to save the most lives.
Yeah. I guess one difference would be immediately. Elementary schools have recess.
Which is why we've had three shootings on the playground, and the shooter has never been a student.
Right.
There, we've had students at elementaries shoot people, shoot a teacher,
Hmm.
shoot a classmate, but we've not had a mass active shooter. So it's not going to start in your cafeteria. It's not going to start inside your school, usually where the middle and highs almost always do. And you're right.
Right.
They either have to get into your building by shooting their way in or some other way, or
Hmm.
they just wait for recess and they got fish in a barrel, low hanging fruit out there. And I haven't been to an elementary school yet that
Yeah.
has a plan for the playground, even though we've had three
Right.
playground attacks and they're not. We got the lockdown drill in the building. Well, how does that work during recess? Well, it doesn't.
Hmm. Uh, just in my experience from seeing the drills and stuff run from schools, I've never seen one done during pickup or drop off times, and I've never seen one done during like lunchtime or like a pep rally for a football game.
Yeah, they don't want to. They want drills that are easy to type, that are easy to drill, that take very little time, that don't disrupt the school day,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't want to trigger anybody. So what's in their
Yeah.
drills are simple things like turn out light switches. Well, I do that at home. That won't make
Yeah.
me upset if I do that at school. Pulling down a shade on the window on the door. Well, I do that at home.
Mm-hmm.
Turning the lock on the doorknob, I do that at home. So they just require easy, simple tasks that work very well every day. We drill it, and an active shooter doesn't show up, but they get people killed on the day the active shooter shows up. And that's another big problem is they're not making their plan for the day the shooter shows up, which is
Mm-hmm.
a horrible, ugly day, and they're not making a plan for that.
Now I have been involved in an incident that did not involve an active shooting, but it did involve three escaped prisoners getting stopped in a traffic stop just outside of a school, bailing from the car and running into the woods just as school was letting out, which created a bunch of instant challenges to
Yeah.
deal with then. But I don't, like I said, I just don't think I've ever seen a drill run where you have everybody moving and not in like a perfect ideal spot. If I need to lock down a school, the ideal time to do that would be when all the students are sitting in the classroom.
Yeah, and
Uh,
everybody knows it's coming, and we don't do it when classes are changing and all that kind of good stuff.
when you go to schools and train school system employees about this topic, do you run into resistance from them when you start posing that idea? We need to run a drill during the bad times or the
Oh
chaotic
yeah,
times.
oh yeah, I get resistance all over the place. 99% resistance or 40% resistance. It's on different things, but the first big inertia that we have to break with schools, if they are a cookie cutter lockdown, everybody does the same thing, regardless of where you are on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if he attacks the cafeteria, even people in the football field house do the exact same thing. Then that's the first big inertia break. Is we got to quit that until everybody does what's least bad for them.
Right.
Everybody makes their own individual decisions. And I've had a career in the Army and I've been a school teacher for 4 years. Both organizations don't really like turning people loose to make decisions for themselves. They like
Right.
order and rule following. Uh, so that's the first thing. Everybody gets their own choice of what to do because they know better than somebody who wrote the plan 8 years ago what's better right there for them and the people they supervise.
Yeah.
And those three options are fight, flee, and barricade. So that's the first thing. Go from everybody does the same thing, cookie cutter, one size fits all, to you have three choices. They will all be bad. Choose the least bad one for you. And
Yeah.
then the next step is obviously out of fight, flee, barricade, fight is best for everybody, not for every individual, but for everybody, because the sooner somebody fights him, the lower the victim count will be. So step one is getting them to understand don't do a one size fits all, tell people three options. The next step is okay, tell them, yeah, there's three options. But for those who are physically and mentally capable of doing deadly, ruthless violence against this active shooter, another human,
Mm-hmm.
we encourage you to. We want you to. Tell us how we can help you. We want you to be equipped to. And if you'll come forward privately and tell us, maybe we'll try to make sure you are spaced out. The people that say, I'm willing to do this, I'll fight him. Then we try to space them out so that we can get to the active shooter more quickly. And then the last step, which is the hardest in a public school, is well, let's give those people what's the most efficient tool to fight the active shooter with.
Yeah.
You can cut grass with a pair of scissors, but I'd rather have a zero turn mower if I'm told I got to cut a football field worth of grass.
Yeah. Um, Pretty sure the first time on the show that you told about an incident where, as you started talking about the fight aspect of it, you got shut down immediately by a school board
Yeah,
administrator.
yeah, we will never advocate violence in this school. Well, yeah, you will. Yeah, you will. On the day he shows up, that's a good slogan and it makes everybody feel good. Violence is not
Mm-hmm.
the answer. But on the day of the attack, that school, whoever is not shot yet, will be screaming into the phone,
Yeah.
get the effing police here now. And I guarantee you they won't say, but you make sure those darn cops don't bring their guns here.
Right.
I've heard a lot of 911 calls recorded,
Right.
past 911 calls from active shooters. Not once did they say, but you make sure those cops don't bring guns when they come here.
Yeah.
So
And
they're screaming into the phone for cops to come do violence on the active shooter. Violence on the
yeah.
active shooter is the solution. It's the only
Right.
solution. The only question is timing. Do you want it to hit? You want to be violent against him and stop him in 15 or 20 seconds, or do you want to be 6 or 8 minutes down the road?
Right. And here's the ugly truth of this. We don't know we have an active shooter problem until the active shooter problem starts.
Yep,
And our first indication of that is typically gunshots.
yep. He's probably shot two or three or four by the time most people's brain connects the dots and they get past the denial and the normalcy bias. And that's the people there that see it. But The
Right.
people down the hall that are hearing it, they will probably take a much greater time, which is why there's normally over a minute delay, somewhere between 1 and 4 minute delay between the first shot of these attacks and the first 911 call being made.
Yeah. Uh, there was an active shooter incident locally to me. I'm not free to talk about all of the details because it is an active, still an active prosecution of two people. My understanding is that the first deputy confronted him, I think, 50 seconds after the first gunshot, which you and I, from a law enforcement perspective, would say, wow, 50 seconds, he got there in a hurry. But if you start looking at this from how many people could you shoot in 50 seconds, that's a long time.
Yeah, I always say time is relative. If you take 50 seconds, if it takes you 50 seconds from ordering your French fries at the McDonald's drive-through to getting your French fries, that's nothing. That goes by
Yeah,
really fast. But
yeah,
if you're shot at for 50 straight seconds inside of a classroom or in a cafeteria, that 50 seconds will seem like an eternity. And a
right,
lot of the uh, articles that I read about these shootings, it'll say something like, and the cops were there in just a few minutes after they were dispatched, after the 911 call. Just a
yeah,
few minutes. Like that's really, really good. Well, it's better than 10 minutes, but
right.
still going to have a lot of people shot.
You know, the in the county where I formerly worked, we had 12 public schools and 3 private schools. And I think they've opened up another public school since I've been retired and gone from there. Um, about 6 of those were within a 3-minute drive from my office. But I still used to think about what awful carnage could happen in the time it would take if I left as soon as it first came over the radio, ran out of my office, jumped in the truck, and took off. How bad could it be by the time I got there?
Your job would be to try to keep it to 25 and not let it get to 30. That would be
Right,
your job. So,
right.
I travel all over the country doing this, and when I tell them the math is very clear that the only
Mhm.
way they can have a reasonable expectation of a low victim count is they have to be violent and fight the active shooter. And all more than once they've said, "But Ed, you see, you're not from around here. You don't understand. We've talked to the sheriff, we've talked to the chief, and he says they can get their cops here really fast." And I tell them, I don't care. That's really fast after the dispatch, which is after a
Mhm.
911 call,
Yep.
which is probably 2 minutes after the first shot. So cops will get here 2 or 3 minute drive time. They're getting here in the 4 or 5 minute mark. And I show them
Right.
in 4 or 5 minutes, you're probably looking at 30, 25 to 30 people shot. Is that the outcome you want? 25 to 30
Yeah.
people shot. Well, no. Well, then we're relying on really fast police response. So I've got another slide that shows 4 times where cops were on the property, and then some really good 29. Northern Illinois University was 29-second response time from a cop. Andy Brown was a minute and a half response, but still got a high victim count. Like I don't grade a plan by the police
Mhm.
response time. I grade it by how many people were shot. And 20 and 30 people shot's not a successful plan, in
Right.
my opinion.
Well, Virginia Tech, there were 2 SWAT teams on the campus, being briefed for a mission when the second active killing incident of the day took place. And their response time was to go from one campus building to another.
Yep.
For those that aren't familiar with the incident, the killer in that, it was actually 2 separate incidents on the same day. He killed 2 people in a dorm, and one of the victims in the dorm was involved in an abusive relationship, and the assumption was her boyfriend had done it. And so they had 2 SWAT teams on campus, and they were briefing to go look for this guy. This is our suspect, and this double murder earlier. This is what we know, etc. When the individual has walked into a classroom and has chained the doors shut and starts killing people in a classroom. And so, like I said, 2 SWAT teams went from one campus building to another, and you could not get a better response from a law enforcement perspective than what happened that day. And those people are still vilified because the cameras showed a ring of cops outside the building, and people were screaming, "Oh, look at those cops standing out on the outside of that building." while people are inside getting killed. Look at those cowards. Well, there were actually two SWAT teams that had already made entry into the building. Those guys were at the perimeter in case the guy flushed and ran.
Yep.
And one SWAT team made it entry through a mechanical room door and went up a stairwell, and the other one, I think they breached a different door and got in.
Yep.
And yeah,
So you got SWAT team on site in 3 minutes after the 911 call. It's a miracle to get a cop there in 3 minutes. They had a
yeah,
SWAT team and they still had 46, 47 people.
yeah.
So yeah.
And it's, I used to work in such a setting, and I would explain to people when they would get talking about, like, look, there's a 4-story campus building. If I'm standing right here and the call comes out that there's somebody on that fourth floor killing people, I've got to get from right here to that fourth floor. How many, just stand here and clap your hands, kind of a static, cadence. How many times could you do that by the time I got to the fourth floor and stopped you? That's how many gunshots could be fired
Yep.
in that same amount of time. And they don't want to hear that reality. They don't think it's somebody's going to materialize and stop it.
Yep. And that's all I do is I show them the math. The average active shooter, when he starts shooting, is going to shoot a new person every 3 to 5 seconds in the first minute, about every
Mhm.
6 to 8, a new person every 6 to 8 seconds in the second minute, a new person every 10 to 12 in the third minute. Now
Right.
that's average. If they're Dayton, Ohio, Tucson, Arizona, really, really aggressive, it's going to be worse.
Right.
So we again, from the Army's perspective, if somehow intelligence we know what our enemy's plan is before we fight them, that's hugely valuable. That's an almost a guarantee win if you know what they're going to do ahead of time. Well, we know what the active shooter's plan is ahead of time. We just refuse to use that knowledge to plan and respond to it.
Right. You and I were talking before we started discussing, before we started the recording. And I brought up that I was in field training, had just graduated from the academy on the day that Columbine took place. And I had just gotten home from my shift, turned on the TV, saw it, and actually called back to the shift commanders, like, hey, y'all need to turn on the TV, see what's happening in Colorado. Um, because I had just graduated from the police academy, and I don't recall there being a whole much to say about this type of incident, other than someone brought up an incident that had happened in McDonald's in California like a decade prior.
Yep.
And then Columbine is the first big one that's in public consciousness, although it's not the first big one of these. Um, wasn't long after that that my agency did training. We trained in 4 and 5 man team responses. It was just still decades later before it got to be, oh, well, really, this is a one officer has to get there and go in and stop it problem. You said something very pivotal. We've been told about all of the screw ups, all the bad responses, but what does good look like? What does this look like when we actually get there and do what we're supposed to do?
Yeah, I think that's a failure in law enforcement training is they only show cops the past screw ups. Okay, so I'm up to here. I'm good on what not to do. I've got that down. I
Mhm.
have plenty of examples of what not to do. Could you just show me what to do? And so when I train cops, I almost always start out with in the beginning before we ever get going. How many of y'all in here have heard of the Antigo, Wisconsin prom shooting? They all look at each other. No, no. Granite Hills, California high school shooting. They look at each other. Tyler, Texas courthouse. They all look at each other. We don't show cops the heroes that were brave, that were at the right place, the right time, acted aggressively,
Mhm.
and saved a lot of lives. We just show them the guys that stayed out of the building, stayed out by their car, and did
Right.
screw up. And that we should show them that, but we should show them both.
Mhm.
Um, if all you do is show up, you're training a baseball team and you just show them people striking out after striking out after striking out, that doesn't help me. I need to know how to hit the dang ball. People need heroes and good examples to go after, and that's something very rarely have I seen.
Yeah. Not long after the Uvalde incident, there was an incident in Nashville where the cops responded and showed up and took out the bad guy post haste. But I guarantee you more people are more familiar with the Uvalde than they
Yep.
are the Nashville incident.
Garland, Texas, a 59-year-old motorcycle cop was standing there when two guys, motivated by radical Islam, that had driven over 1,000 miles to do this. Two guys got out of a car, both wearing body armor, both with rifles shooting. and a 59-year-old motorcycle cop drew his pistol and shot and killed both of them. Every cop ought to see that. Every cop ought to hear a video of Greg Stevens telling his story, and it's out there. It's available. It's free.
Yeah.
That it just kills me that we don't do it.
Uh, Forsyth County, Georgia, it's a county up in the northeast portion of the state, had a guy show up, pull up in front of the courthouse, get out and open fire. And similarly aged, older, you know, corporal with the sheriff's office that was working the front door of the courthouse security, kind of like, oh, this is a job he can do till he retires type thing. Um, Saw that and was like, not at my courthouse, and charged out the front door down the steps and took out the bad guy.
Yeah, I show
Yeah,
the video of Tyler Courthouse where old fat detectives, lieutenants in civilian clothes, bailiffs, deputies, and Tyler cops are all pushing each other out of the way to get up front and shoot this guy.
yeah,
So we got to show cops that. So like he when he went to that courthouse, he thumped a wasp nest.
yeah. I think the difference is it's the cops decided this could happen, and what am I going to do to stop it? And I'm ready to stop it. This is what I'm going to do, versus people who never accept that reality.
Yeah, like John Hearn talks about the one that says, "I knew this was a possibility, and today's the day." Versus, "Oh my God, how could this possibly be happening?"
Yeah,
But the thing,
yeah,
there's no way to know who will do what. So,
right.
but I
Um,
think there's something. It's not all inclusive, but there is something to having skin in the game. So people that are protecting their own church, people that are protecting their family, people that work there, people that have associates there,
mhm,
maybe have a little more skin in the game than someone from outside coming in or someone who's being paid $25 an hour to be there as a security guard.
yeah. Um, what have you seen as far as the math goes, as far as the timing of response when it's like an active parishioner in a church defending the church, someone in a work setting actively defending the work setting, and the response from the boys in blue getting there?
Well, when three things exist simultaneously at an active shooter attack, right now we went as of last Sunday, we went from an 88% to an 88.4% success rate of having a single digit victim, which is 0 to 9. And those three things are a good person has a gun, they're close enough to hear or see the first shot, and they act aggressively to stop it. Citizens do that more often than cops, not because they're better than cops, but because they're there and the cops aren't. Active shooters, like most violent criminals, go out of their way not to start their violent attack right in front of a uniformed cop if they can help it. Now they've screwed up a couple of times. Granite Hills, California, being one of them, and they just unlucky or stupid start near a cop, and they pay the price for that. But when those three things occur, it really doesn't matter if you have a badge, if you don't. We just went in the church a week ago. We went from 2 out of 2 to 3 out of 3 when they showed up to attack a church who had a welcoming party, as I call it, an armed security team there. They've gotten a very low number. 5, 2, and 1 are the victims of those three. If you count an off-duty cop at the church for security stopping the active shooter, then that's 4 out of 4. So that works very well. And again, that's their church.
Mhm.
They're not getting paid probably, but they've asked, they volunteered to be at risk and take on that responsibility and protect their church.
Do you know anything about the training that those three churches, their security teams have had?
And well, what was put out was the one recently, supposedly been trained by USCCA. I don't know that, but that's what's been put out. Jack Wilson is a gun trainer and owns a small facility. I'm guessing, I've never been to his facility. I'm guessing kind of like mine. So he's a gun trainer. Uh, Gina Som was a former police officer, but I don't know how much training she had other than that. Uh, Jack Wilson had been a reserve deputy in the past, but that probably meant added absolutely nothing to his gun skills. Yeah, I was a reserve deputy. I'm now a part-time police officer. Nothing I've had in law enforcement has in any way increased my skill level with a handgun. So that's all I know about those. But something I've been coming to say to armed responders is I've heard many, many times the saying of you'll never rise to the occasion. You will only sink to your level of training. And I understand that saying, but I've come to believe it's not 100% correct, or you couldn't explain Eli Dickin. 22-year-old car mechanic with no military or police training, no professional gun training at all. My granddad taught me how to shoot when I was little, and that was good enough. I think sometimes us gun trainers, especially men gun trainers, get a little egotistical, and we're like, oh, we try to make this seem like it's so difficult. And if you hadn't had this many thousands of hours training with the instructors that I personally approve of, then you'll never be able to win a gunfight. And here's a 22-year-old car mechanic with virtually no training, but he understood how to line up two things and pull a lever and kept his
Mhm.
emotions apparently under control.
Yeah.
Uh, and that would have been a slaughter in that mall, I'm sure, but he stopped it with 5 victims.
Yeah. Yeah. I get a little grief from the competition side when I point out that the shooting problems that we typically face are typically not all that hard.
No, and the citizens, Jack Wilson was 1 out of 1. Stephen Williford was 6 out of 6 if you count a graze of the helmet. Pastor David George was 5 out of 6. Uh, Eli Dickin was 8 out of 10, and the two he missed were at 43 yards. Vic Stacy was 5 out of 5 at 55 yards with a Colt Python. One, at that distance, blind, stupid luck. 2 out of 2, you better go buy a lottery ticket because that, but 5 out of 5, you got to say that had something to do with sights and trigger and skill. Um, Humberto Garcia out in Las Vegas shot 12 rounds. I have made contact with him. I'm hoping to find out. I don't know how many of those hit, but it was enough to put the guy on the ground well before the cops got there. But you got, Andy Brown, military police cop, shot the guy at 70 yards. So the t most cops used to hate it when I used to say it. Now they're most okay with it. The badge is irrelevant.
All right.
Are you there? Do you have a gun? And will you do something about it? And it doesn't really matter if you have a badge or not. If you have a gun and you're there and you'll do something about it, it normally ends pretty quickly.
All
They're not, they're scary, scary as hell, but they're not John Wick. They're not Navy SEALs. If you have a gun and minimal skill, but you have the emotional control to use that skill, then they're not that hard to fight. They're not total difficult to fight without a gun.
right.
Because I show, many times that unarmed people, victims, fought back and won because, hey, they're not expecting it. If you watch the videos of how these active shooters are walking around, just holding the gun down by their sides, playing with their hair, that the last thing they expect is somebody there before the cops show up to attack them. They wouldn't have come here if they expected that. And then again, they're not Navy SEALs. They're not a MMA fighter, hopefully, thank God.
Right.
So they're really quite easy to fight. We just got a plan to do that.
Mhm. Um, what's the record on performance, say like school staff fighting back?
We have, I show 5 on a slide. I'm pretty sure we have 6. There's one, I think, in Indiana that I haven't put on the slide yet, but I'm pretty comfortable as a female inside the cafeteria. Um, Stopped a student with a handgun. Other than that one, we have 2 teachers stopping. One, after he'd been shot 3 times, tackled the guy. One teacher tackled a shooter out in the parking lot as the day ended, and then we have 2 students
Mhm.
who stopped. Well, I should say 4 students. It's 2 incidents, and one student stopped him, and the other one 3 students stopped him. And then we have a construction worker who ran the one last week in the church. That was not the first time we hit an active shooter with a truck. In the elementary school in California, he jumped the fence and started walking in on kids, and there was a construction team because they were doing construction on the roof of the elementary school. And a guy was sitting named Carlos Padita was sitting in the in the cab of the truck doing paperwork when he saw the guy, started up the truck, drove across the playground, and ran over the guy. And then everybody piled on and tackled him. But again, we have times where brave people tried, but were shot down and unsuccessful. So there's a lot more unsuccessful without a gun
Right.
because it's simple to understand why. If you have a gun, you can fight him from a distance. If you don't have a gun, you have to get touchy distance.
Right. Well, I have to ask this important question. How many grains are in a Ford F-150?
Well, that's an assault truck.
Right.
There's no need for that big of a gas tank. So
Yeah.
that was the joke. We was wondering how long until they'll come out saying that
Yeah.
assault trucks have to be a background check or something. But
Yeah.
we need, so what I say tell people is math, because of the math,
Mm-hmm.
what we fight the active shooter with is negotiable. It's debatable. But the fact you, the victims, have to fight back is not. So the gun is the most efficient by far, but it's not the only one. So if by law or policy choice, you're not going to have guns here, then it does not take away the responsibility that you have to fight. So we need to get a fight plan. I don't care if it's hot coffee in the face. I don't care if it's a baseball bat to the throat, a fire extinguisher to the back of the head, tackling them, running over them with a Ford F-150. Pick your poison, pick your method, but you got to do it. So we need to train people to do it. But schools and other places don't want to do that because, my God, we're training for violence. That's exactly what you're training. So we don't need jujitsu classes. Good if you have them, but we just need to train simple things like if you watch the videos, these shooters almost always walk back and forth, which means they're eventually going to turn their back on you. And they have been shooting a gun, likely a rifle or a shotgun, inside of a building, so their hearing is probably crap. Now, some of them have hearing protection, but that's probably also going to keep them, plus auditory exclusion, keep them from hearing an approach. They go through doors. What a great place to stop them. So teach people that. We got to teach people what reloads and malfunctions look like. All the gun people will say, "What? We know that." No, but there's people that have never touched a gun before in their life. So we got to teach them what reloads. If you
Mm-hmm.
see this motion, the gun's not working. So with teachers always using that, it's like your stapler's jammed up. So the first thing when you're staple, because they understand that your stapler's jammed up, you stop looking at your students. You have to look at this broke tool. And so if he's not looking at you, that's a great time to run or to fight. And then you have to open it up, clear the malfunction, get the bent staples out, and put it in. So he's going to have his attention on his tool, not on his victims. And there's going to be a few seconds, maybe many seconds of time there that the gun doesn't work. And so in Sandy Hook, a 6-year-old boy knew what a reload looked like and took the opportunity to run. In Thurston High School in Oregon, an 11th grade student who had already been shot saw the guy doing a reload, got up and ran and tackled him because he knew the gun's not working right now. And then in the community college, Seattle Pacific, both. When the guy went to do a reload, one guy sitting down ran, and a senior student came from around the corner with pepper spray, barefooted, and attacked the guy and stop the attack. But if you don't know what you're seeing, that's a reload or a malfunction, and then I don't have any data on a cop or an armed citizen that had a malfunction while shooting an active shooter. I have a huge long list of malfunctions by the active shooter because they don't know what they're doing. They stole a gun, it wasn't lubed, so they have a lot of malfunctions, and there's about 6 or 8 of them where the semi-automatic malfunction, they could
Mm-hmm.
not make it work again, and that's a fairly simple task. But that's how low skilled and low knowledge these people are.
I worked a murder scene. I was the second person there to arrive, and the first deputy that arrived was actually doing medical care to the victim. And so I'm the first one to actually start looking at the scene, and I see live round, empty casing, live round, empty casing, whatever. What on earth? And when I found the murder weapon, or one of us, whoever found the murder weapon, it was at double feed up underneath a car in the garage where the shooting took place. And after all the crime scene photos had been taking place, I glove up, reach up under the car and get it. And I see it's in double feed. We do all the document stuff. It turned out that it was a Colt 1903 in 38 Colt, but it was loaded with 9 millimeter,
Ah,
which will chamber and fire, but it won't feed in the gun. And what was happening was he would shoot, the gun would malfunction. He'd clear the malfunction, he'd shoot again. And every time he cleared the malfunction, it would throw a live round out on the ground next to the thing. So here you go. This guy gets this gun. Oh, this gun's loaded. I'm good to go. And I'm convinced that that's why we had one murder instead of two, because the wife of the victim was on the scene as well. And yeah, I think he just gave up after like his third malfunction and threw the
yeah.
gun and took off running.
Well, Townville Elementary in South Carolina, he put on a web page before he went and did his shooting. My goal is at least 50. I want 150, but I at least 50. But most active shooters have multiple guns. The ones that have one gun and only one mag tend to be schools because that's all they could steal. They could only
Mhm.
find one of their dad's guns.
Right.
And so he brings dad's XD-40 pistol, and he's one of the three that shot the kids on the playground. Um, and he shot four people in 12 seconds. That's one every 3 seconds, which is typical. But then his gun malfunctioned. He could not fix it. I had read one piece of data that said this, but I never used it because I wasn't sure of it until I was out in couple of weeks ago at South Carolina doing their SRO conference. And a guy said, no, I was there. Yeah, that's true. He had, I don't know what there was he had dad's XD-40. I don't remember if he had all 9 millimeter rounds in the mag or some 9 millimeter mixed in there. And that's what was causing some of his problem. But
Hmm.
we all know, even if you've never had formal training on how to clear a malfunction, if no matter what kind you have, if you unload the gun and reload the gun, it works. So you don't have to have formal, John Wick clearing malfunction training. But he didn't even do that. He just looked at his gun the same way I look at my computer when it doesn't work because I don't know what the hell to do. I don't know how to fix the thing. And that's all and it stopped at four. He wanted at least 50, and he probably would have got that had he brought a second gun or had the ability to clear dad's pistol.
Or had it correctly loaded.
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
Um, Probably the luckiest we got was Freeman or Fremont. It's a high school in Washington State. He went there with dad's AR and 8 preloaded magazines in a sports bag. And when he went to chamber the first round, he jammed it and he didn't know how to fix it. So he did not 8 preloaded AR mags and he couldn't fire one round because he jammed it up and he didn't know how to clear it. So we lucked out hugely there.
Wow. Wow. Earlier I said we don't know that we have an incident until the first shot's fired, but I don't know that that's necessarily true because there's probably a common denominator amongst all of these perpetrators that we could study and could help identify. Now, in the United States, we can't lock people up for what they might do, but there are some steps that could possibly be taken in some of these incidents. How do school systems identify these people? If it's like a student from that school is going to do it, just in public can we identify anyone?
I don't, I don't think it's as easy as some people say it is.
Right.
Uh, I just, I have a slide where I talk about we spend all this time and money and training and effort on what I call the bookends, everything before he shows up and everything after it's over. And so, threat assessment and security audits and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And 12th of June, I got a email from an SRO, and he said, "This reminds me of your class. We're spending 2 days going over a 12-page threat assessment document that, when the shooting starts, will not save anybody's life."
Right.
In the past, it was more common for them to telegraph leakage, they call it, say it. But now it's very rare that they leak to the point to where we know they're going to do it. Now, oftentimes, like I mentioned, the town bill, they'll go on an anonymous website or some kind of anonymous online forum with a made up name, and a day or two or three before the event, they'll post something. And then it'll come out later that he did that. And they'll say, well, he posted that the day before. Why didn't they do anything? Well, because they found that after the shooting, after they did the
Yeah.
warrants and the summons and the search warrants, and they looked through his electronical history, and then that's how they found out that it was there. But I'll be sitting. I sit in on a lot of training when I go to these state conventions or conferences, and they'll say, "Here's what you look for." Someone that's drawing pictures of guns. And I'm thinking, crap, I did that quite a bit when I was in junior and high school,
I did too.
did that
Yeah.
quite a bit, people that
Yeah.
spend a lot of time researching past active shooters. I'm like, oh crap, I do that kind of bit.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm all for, like, in the last 2 or 3 months, I think I've read that we stopped like three. We stopped one at a high school. It was going to be at a high school graduation. Stopped one out in California. I think if what I read is true, that we have stopped some, and I'm all for that when we can.
Right.
But I think more and more now they're way more savvy. Kids are way more savvy than most of us adults on online stuff. So they just don't say stuff like that. The Bethel,
Right.
Alaska kid asked a friend to come video, which he did, the shooting,
Hmm.
but they just don't do that anymore. And sometimes the shooter will do something and I'll say, oh, well, look at his history. I knew this. But then how many kids across America had that same history but didn't bring a freaking gun to school?
Right.
So So that's a problem.
Yeah. Uh, I saw it where, and it was typically it came up in the weeks after a big publicized incident where a student would say something at school that immediately would set everybody off, and they would start the whole thing. Oh, well, we need to lock this boy up, or all this kind of stuff. In one instance, there were two separate students that were involved in different things in the school here locally. The rumors to those got conflated into one thing that never happened. And that was what was going around town. And I was getting phone calls. Why haven't the federal marshals showed up and locked this boy up? Because that school gets federal money and all that kind of stuff. Like all this stuff that never even happened. And I could not convince people like, look, what you're hearing did not happen. But there's just people that they just actively believe we can just go. Yeah. We think that youngin might do something at this school. We go lock them up.
Yep. I was at a conference this last summer, and I don't remember if he was a psychologist or psychiatrist, but he presented something that kind of makes a little sense to me. He said, there's basically, this doesn't explain every one, but he goes, I see a big cluster of active shooters that fit into three categories. And one is someone, at least from their perspective, they have had a series of losses. Lost my job, lost my romantic relationship, lost. So now my life's hell. There's nowhere
Mm-hmm.
to go. So why not go out with a bang? The other is psychotic, which the Thurston High School. He heard voices in his head. That's been under psychiatric care of a psychiatrist for many years, but that didn't seem to fix it. And then there's the psychopaths, the ones that just think they're better than everybody else and they want to cause pain and they want to hurt people. One of the Columbine kids looks to me like probably the Covenant girl fits that. So a lot of them that I've studied do fit into one of those three. Um, but sometimes it's just, uh, you know, instead of just I'm going to kill myself, I'm going to kill a whole bunch of people before I kill myself, so that I'll be known. Because
Yeah.
if I just go kill myself, no one will ever know me because I'm a loser at life. But if I go kill 30 people and then kill myself, then I'll be famous. Or in some cases, Sutherland Springs seemed to be this one. I want to kill somebody. I want to kill my boss who I think fired me and treated me bad. Well, once I kill him, I'm done, right? Prison for the rest of my life. So I'm I'm going to go out with a bang and kill a whole
Yeah.
bunch of other people while I'm there too. I don't focus so much on why they do it. I just focus on I don't focus on prevent, other than if they know there's a welcoming party, they're probably not going to attack you. It may not stop an attack and just relocate it somewhere else. In the Army, as an armor officer in units with tanks, I didn't deal with foreign policy. I didn't negotiate with nations to not go to war. That was the State Department. But the fact
Mm-hmm.
that I was a part of a ready, a capable military force that could come hurt you if you didn't do what the State Department wanted, then that was a deterrent. So that's the only way I work with deterrence is if a business, a school, a church, if they know if I come there, I probably won't get a high number, then likely they won't come there. But I focus on if they come there anyway, if they start shooting, regardless of what his motivation was or whatever, how can we get a low victim count? The only way to get a low victim count is to stop him quickly. And the only way to stop him quickly is somebody there. So
Yeah.
that's what I work on.
All right. Let's talk specifically about the book. How's it broken down? What are the major parts of it?
Yeah. So I am a procrastinator. Many people will testify to that. And here it worked for me because I kept kicking this can down the road. I thought about writing a book. I've been researching this for 17 years. I thought about writing a book some time ago, but I'm happy I kicked the can this far because had I written it when I first started thinking about it, I had not connected a lot of the dots and done a lot of the math. Um, so I think it's a better book now because of that. So writing it was really easy because I've been doing this I've been doing presentations and stuff for 14, 15 years, but really only since Uvalde as my dance
Mhm.
card got really full, and I'm doing it all the time. So I'm saying this over and over and over multiple times a month. So all I had to do was take what I already have packaged in my slides and what I'll say over and over and type it onto paper and format it. So that was pretty easy. Um, I start off by saying what the book is not, and that is it's not, this isn't a research book because I started studying this 17 years ago only out of personal interest. It wasn't to talk about it or teach about it or write a book about it. It was just, hey, I want to find out more about this. So I didn't document every piece of information that I have written down or in my head somewhere. And it's not political, although I'm that's one of my curiosities about the book now that it's out there is how many people will take it as a political book. It's about math, and math is not political. What I hope it is, it's a wake up call that, if the first active shooter in America was the one last Sunday, you could expect not to be ready for it because who'd have thunk it. But
Yeah.
40 years, over 40 years, we've known about this active shooter, and they pretty much do the same thing every time. There's no excuse for not being ready for it, but we're not ready for it in most cases. Now, that church a week ago was. So it's a wake up call that most of us are screwing up. Just look at our schools. And the schools is really the worst because, if you think it's too dangerous to go to your church, you can not go to church. A lot of churches post online now. You can stay home in your underwear and watch your church service online. You can change churches. If you think
Hmm.
it's too dangerous to go to the store, well, we got Amazon and Grubhub, but in most states, the law requires you to send your kids to the school. So it's a requirement that you be there. You can't opt out of it. And we're not protecting them. I think that's just almost criminal that the government requires you to be there and they really don't have any kind of realistic plan to do that. So we have to change. You mentioned Columbine, 1999, shot 34 total people. 22 of the 34, the vast majority of them, were shot in the media center. And most people can remember the teacher in the media center as the shooters are coming down the hall on the phone with 911, and she interrupts her 911 call to scream at her kids, get under the tables, kids, heads under the tables, stay under your tables. And of course, the tables had no tablecloths on them.
Hmm.
So getting up under tables when someone's going to walk into your room and shoot you, it has no value. In fact, it
Right.
makes the job easier. Well, that was 1999. Uvalde was 3 years ago. And what did the teacher in classroom 111, where most of the kids were shot in Uvalde, what did that teacher instruct his kids to do when the shooting started outside of his classroom? Get under the tables. We just absolutely refuse to adapt and learn and get better at this. We
Hmm.
just apply the same cookie cutter things that work great in the drills. They just don't work here. I tell them a little bit about me, about my background. And then that leads into why I got started in this. Because I tell them I'm a retired Army officer, and I tell them 10 days after I retired out of the Army, uh, and 16 months after getting back from Iraq. And of course, I'm an armor officer, so combat arms, infantry, and armor are the every branch in the Army has a mission statement, and armors is to close with and destroy the enemy using fire maneuver and shock effect. And that's what we need to do to the active shooter. So I left 24-year career where day-to-day work conversations was how to do ruthless violence against other humans. And I start teaching at a very, very good public high school, one of the top 5 in the state every year, really good school. And I'm there the first couple of days before school start. The kids show up because we're all have to do that training, and they're going over the school policies. And they say, okay, if we have an active shooter, the teachers, your job is to get all your students and pack them in the corner of your room, the blind corner that cannot be seen from the door. And I'm looking around, and everybody else in there is shaking their heads up and down. That's right. That's what we do. We get in the corner of the room. And they didn't say this, but this is what I'm hearing, and wait for him to come in there and kill you. Packed in the corner of the room. Other than pulling my own gun and shooting my own kids, I can't have made his job easier. At
Right.
least if they're under tables, the shooter has to walk around the room to shoot them all. If they're all packed tight in the corner, he doesn't even have to aim. He just points in the general direction of the 25, 30 people and shoots until no one's standing up anymore. So that's what got me into this. I'm like, this is the dumbest private in the Army knows. If someone's coming to shoot at you, you don't bunch up. You spread out and preferably
Right.
shoot back, but you spread out.
Right.
So I don't say anything because I'm the snot-nosed rookie teacher. Um, but I wait till later to go talk to the assistant principal in charge of security. But I'm thinking, many times in my life, even still, I've heard a policy, a decision, and I thought that's absolutely stupid. That's crazy. But then I find out I didn't know about some limitations, some parameters that, oh,
Mhm.
well, now, oh, it makes sense now. And that's what I thought it was here. I'm like, these are
Yeah.
good people. They care. They care about the kids. They care about the staff. They've been doing this. They got PhDs. They got masters. They've been doing this for decades. The shooter's been, this is 2007. I mean, the active shooter's been out there 30 years shooting schools. So they got to know something about this that I don't, because
Mhm.
it seems absolutely the opposite, the worst thing we could do, except for shoot our own kids. Um, so that's why I started studying this. There's got to be something here that they know that I
Mhm.
don't, but I found out there wasn't. In fact, they know very little. They know nothing,
Right.
and they don't want to know anything other than what's an easy drill that'll meet the state requirement, so I can check the block and move on. So I go to
What
talk.
did, I'm sorry, go
What?
ahead. I was about to
No, it's,
ask, what did the assistant principal say when you
yeah,
had the
and great
conversation?
guy, great guy. I played
Yeah.
basketball with him after school. Great guy. I said, hey, I'm on the first floor. I have a huge 4 foot by 4 foot window that opens up
Mhm.
to the outside. I have 11th graders, right? So why can't we go out the window and run away from the guy that's in the building trying to kill us? And I got told, no, Mr. Monk, we can't have a policy. We can't let the kids run away. It'll take hours to get accountability of them. And I remember sitting there thinking, well, yeah, if they're all dead on my classroom
They're
floor,
easy to account
yeah,
for.
but but see, they
Yeah.
had no experience with
Yeah.
violence. And I had come out of a profession where planning to be violent while receiving violence was something I
Yeah.
knew how to plan for. And they didn't. It wasn't that they're stupid or bad people. Be like if you said, Ed, my car won't start. Will you come help me work on it? I'm like, well, I'll
Yeah.
get a sledgehammer and I'll come over and,
Yeah.
there's nothing I know how to do. So I said, okay, um, if the policy is we have to stay in the room, which I would not have followed if an active shooter came up.
Right.
But if the policy is we stay in the room, if we stayed in the room, instead of being in the corner where he comes in my room and sees 30 people packed in the corner, I got 11th graders. I got football players. Why? How about me on one side of the door, one or two of my football players on the other side of the door? We have a little welcoming party. And I got told, no, absolutely not. We can't have a policy that we fight the active shooter or insurance will go up. And I'm sure I blinked at him a couple of times. Again, they understood accountability because every day
Mhm.
the active shooter's not there, that's one of the easiest ways to get fired as a teacher is have a principal come in and say, Mr. Monk, I need to see Billy Johnson. Where is Billy? I
Yeah.
don't even know where Billy, that's an easy way to get fired.
Mhm.
And so that's what got me researching into this and then starting to talk to my school about it from a point. Listen, I've looked into this a bit. I know a little more about it, and then other schools and then churches and then that. And then what I found is just it's very simple. It's not like I found a cure for cancer that no one else could find, or I found out, you know, figured out time travel. This is Jethro Bodine math. This is Gazinta's carrier knots, really easy math. Once they start, it's all about time and math. And when you hear news reports about it, they'll never talk about the time and math. He's going to shoot a new person every few seconds. So the sooner we stop it, the fewer victims we'll have. The longer we let it go, the more victims we'll have. Haven't talked to anybody yet who isn't in favor of fewer victims. So we all know what we want, but we just don't have the guts or testicles to do what math clearly shows us we have to do. We have to, the words are almost identical, but it's an absolute 180-degree out concept. We have to take a huge jump from wanting an attack to stop quickly with a low victim count to planning to cause it to end quickly with a low victim count. And that requires violence. And schools absolutely hate violence. They don't want to talk about it, much less plan for it, much less
Right.
train for it. So things that we're uncomfortable with, we outsource. If you don't want to change the oil in your car and all that dirt and grime, then you go to Quickie Lube and you outsource it and let somebody else do it. And no one's getting shot every few seconds that you're driving to Quickie Lube, but someone's getting shot every few seconds. They can't outsource this and have a low victim count. And we just refuse to see it. And that's what I go show them. And even when I show them, it's the boogeyman arguments. They'll come up with the reasons why not to do what math says they have to do because they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I usually, it's like having horrible abdominal pain for a week and it gets worse and worse. And you finally go to the doctor and he says, Lee, you got acute appendicitis. That thing's swell up. It's about to burst any minute. You say, well, that sounds bad. He It's like, oh no, that is bad. You're going to die if that thing bursts. Well, yeah, that's bad. Do I have any alternatives, any options? Oh yeah, yeah, we're going to cut you open, rip that thing out of there. Are there any risk involved in that? Oh yeah, lots of risk, lots of risk. Well, I don't want to do it then because I want to avoid risk. Well, if you don't do that, you're going to die, which is more risk. So John
Yeah.
Farnham, we're not guaranteed a risk-free life. It's about choosing
Hmm.
the least risk. So everything about planning for the active shooter is bad. It's about choosing the least bad. When the active shooter shows up, every option you have to deal with him is bad. It's about choosing the least bad. So just, and this is in the book. When I was brought up, we need to get out of the cookie cutter lockdown. Everybody does the same thing. If you are capable, if you're not going to fight the guy, then run. Just run. Get away from him. If you run, you're harder to shoot for the few seconds he can still see you,
Hmm.
and within just a few seconds, you're impossible to shoot.
Yeah.
And I had a principal of a high school that had a state highway, a 2-lane state highway, 150 yards from his building. And he says, "Oh no, we can't let the kids run out of the building. They could. This is a high school now. They could run out there and get hit by a car, 150 yards away from the school." He didn't want to. He wanted everybody to stay in and do a really
Hmm.
easy drill called the lockdown, which will
Yeah.
get him killed the day the shooter shows up. But that's what he wanted. So he's coming up with excuses not to do what the math
Yeah.
says that we have to do. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
You
So
know.
I point out 40 years of failure.
Hmm.
Um, so school, there's basically three options for any organization: a church, a school, a business, a government office. Option one is we call 911 and wait on the cops. Historically, that has failed on the day of the attack because of time and math. It takes 1 to 4 minutes for somebody to call 911, a few seconds for that to turn into a dispatch, 2 to 3 minutes of driving, and that's if you're in a city serviced by a city police department. So you're going to be in the 20s, 30s, or 40s. Um, So that's option one. It usually fails. Option two could be called 1A. It's a slight deviation of option one. And that is we're going to have a cop or cops already on the property, like a school resource officer, like a cop paid off duty at a festival or
Hmm.
a church or a hospital or something. That has a history of failure. Not 100%, but it has a history of failure. Columbine had an SRO. Parkland had an SRO. Santa Fe had two SROs. Didn't stop him. And all the attackers at all of those were students who knew the SRO would be there. And they came anyway. They just attack a different part of the campus. Option three is we are going to fight this guy and stop him. We're going to attack him, counterattack him like rabid wasp. We will have him stopped before the first responding cop or ambulance gets on our property. We'll already be treating and prepping casualties. Option three is the only one that gives us a high, any reasonable expectation, and it actually has about a 90% chance of a low victim count. Option one and two has a very bad history of on the day of the attack, but most schools out there are still having option one or option two, which I can't understand why parents in America put up with it. They just don't understand it, I guess. The 911 system almost always gives us a high victim count. The only exceptions is if they're an exceedingly slow shooter or they bring one gun and it malfunctions and we luck
Yeah.
out that. If you ask most uh, superintendents or any leaders, but really superintendents or principals of schools, God forbid an active shooter comes to one of your campuses, comes to your school and starts shooting, how many victims are you going to have? And they'll almost always say, "Ooh, man, I hope not many." Oh, chief, time out. You're in a leadership position. You have responsibility. Everybody hopes.
Right.
You got to do some adult leadership stuff. Your plan can't be hope. The only reason to have an active shooter plan is hope has failed. The only reason to have a life jacket on in the boat is hope has failed and that thing has capsized or you've fallen out. The only reason to have life insurance is hope has failed. The only reason to have house insurance, airbags in your car, is that hope has failed. So it's really hard, again, in the Army, before every combat operation, you're required to do a casualty estimate to estimate, given historical stuff, how many casualties you think you'll have. And then if you don't like that estimate, there's things you can do to lower that. So that's what everybody has to do, including schools. Say, well, how many casualties are you going to have? Um, if you're willing to have 25, then you can let the attack go on for about 3 minutes. If you're willing to have 20, you can let it go on for about 20 minutes. But if you want single digit victims, which is what I recommend, then you have to stop it in the first. It has to be stopped in the first 30 seconds, and that means you have to stop it because no one can be communicated with, brought here, and within 30 seconds. So that leaves you with you have to do it. So we talk a lot about the clock,
Mhm.
and what I call lesson number two. We've already been talking about Columbine, and so what I tell them is what's in the book. Columbine, it took us about a decade as a country and law enforcement to learn what I call lesson number one from Columbine, which is we can't wait on SWAT. But they're better trained, they're better equipped. I know they are, but we can't wait on them. SEAL Team 6 is better than your SWAT team, but we can't afford to
Yeah.
wait on them either. So it took us 10 years. Okay, we'll form a diamond, we'll form a triad, partner tactics, and then finally one cop. That was lesson number one. We can't wait on SWAT. What I advocate is what time teaches us is we can't wait. Lesson number two is we can't even wait on a cop. Why can't we wait on SWAT? Takes him 45 to 60 minutes. He can shoot too many people in that amount of time. Why can't we wait
Mhm.
on a cop? The earliest you could expect a responding cop to arrive is 4 minutes. In the fourth minute of the attack, he can shoot too many people in that. And more and more people realize this. We're just not acting on it, unfortunately.
Right.
So the victims have to stop it. How can victims stop an active shooter? Well, there's three ways. They can shoot him down. That has a very high success rate. That's what the cops are going to do when they get here. It also works if you don't have a badge. Shooting him down works extremely well. Or by threatening him with deadly force, he chooses to shoot himself, which also has an extremely high success rate. I can't name one active shooter who shot himself in the head and then continued to shoot innocent people. That's a trend that has been changing.
Mhm.
15 years ago, I'd have told you that he's going to do that 80 or 90% of the time. Now it's about 50% of the time, but it's still 50-50. So you won't even have to clean your gun if you have a gun there. Option three is you don't have a gun, so you fight him unarmed. And that's not my preferred method. But if the victims do not have a gun among them, they have two choices. They're both really bad. Fight him without a gun or watch him shoot 20, 30, or 40 of you. Those are
Mhm.
both bad options, but fighting him without a gun is obviously the least bad. It can work. It has worked. So I show them schools and other places where people have fought back and stopped them. So that's what you have to plan to do. If you hunker down and try to survive until the cops come stop it, you're not going to like the numbers. You may be a lucky one that doesn't get shot, but you're not going to like how many people have been shot by the time they get there. Um, Schools, they don't even, they've been, we've been at this 40 years and a lot of them are schools, but still they like cookie cutter, one size fits all. We're not studying the enemy to understand. So with schools, high schools are more than half of all school shootings. So if I'm a superintendent, of course, I'm going to look at all my campuses, but the high school is going to get most of my stuff.
Mhm.
And I don't see them doing that. And I suspect it's either because they don't know the data or they don't want to get accused of playing favorites if they spend
Yep.
more money or do more stuff at one campus than they do at the other. The shooter at a high school, if it's a high school shooting, which is over half of school shootings, it's one of your own students. The very rare exceptions when it hasn't been a current student, it was a former student. So, and if you go to middle school, and the most likely place to start is a cafeteria in a high school. And again, I go talk to high schools and ask the principal, what's your active shooter response plan? Well, it's this, let me explain it to you. It's this thing called a lockdown drill. Let me show you how it works. Come down here in the hallway and I'll show you how it works. I'm like, well, let's go to your cafeteria because that's where it's most likely to start for you. Well, it doesn't really work down there. Let me show you how it works down
Mhm.
here in the classrooms like that. Oh, let's go talk about your cafeteria. None of them, no school has an active shooter plan in the cafeteria other than if they have an SRO and he's in the cafeteria. But that if the SRO is in the cafeteria, it's not going to start there. He's going to go to some other place on campus to start it. Middle schools, it's the shooter is one of your own students. So that's probably roughly two-thirds of all school shootings is high school and middle school. It's one of your own students, which means two things. Any effort, money, time spent hardening the outside of that building is not going to keep an active shooter out. It's going to delay cops and EMS. And they, if the shooter is one of your own students, they know if you have an SRO or two SROs, they know what they look like. So if your kids are in the cafeteria and you have two SROs in the cafeteria, like Santa Fe, he's just going to go to a separate building, the art complex, to start his attack. So even though you have cops on your campus, they're not close enough to hear or see the shot. So even they're
Mhm.
going to have to wait on a radio call. And often, for school SROs, what they don't get active shooter location. They got told fire alarms going off in the art complex. Can you go check out what it was? Columbine got disturbance in the west parking lot. Parkland got fireworks going off near Building 12. The SRO at Arapahoe High School got, his first name was James. James, I need you. That's what came over the school radio. Well, that's a lot of help. For what and where? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Um, so, but a lot of schools they'll say, we have an SRO, so we're safe. No, you're not. Let me show you a list of 12 schools that had one or two SROs and they got attacked anyway. It's not a guarantee they
Yeah.
won't come, and it's not a guarantee of a low victim count. I'm not saying don't have an SRO. They have some deterrent effect. I can show you examples where active shooters relocated their attack because of known police presence, but it's just not 100% deterrence. The elementary is different, so we have to treat it different. It's not a student, so it's probably not going to start inside your school. They're going to shoot their way into your school, or they're going to shoot your kids on the playground. And again, no high school has a plan in the cafeteria. No elementary has a plan for the playground, even though it started there several times. The lockdown drill is a horrible, horrible plan for the day of the attack. It's a wonderful plan for every day he doesn't show up. And so they just love their lockdown drills, but it gets people shot. Most people don't know that in Parkland, the Parkland shooting in Florida, which I can't believe 6 years ago now, he shot for a minute and a half on the first floor of that 3-story building. 90 seconds, he shot 24 people. 18 of those 24 on the first floor were inside their locked classrooms, behind locked doors. The shooter never went into a classroom. He just shot through doors, and he could have shot through walls, but he didn't. And he got 18 by just shooting into 3 classroom doors. There's 10 classrooms on each floor. If he'd have shot into more classrooms, he'd have got more. But that teacher, like I was in 2007, was told, if you stay in your classroom behind your locked door, you'll be safe till the cops come here and solve this thing. And of course, that was a lie. And so I play a interview with one of the teachers inside of one of those 3 classrooms who saw
Mhm.
her kids get shot by bullets coming through the door. And she's sitting there going, she thought he would come into the classroom, and I would have assumed he would too. And
Yeah.
she's like, I'm crouched behind my desk, my kids are getting shot. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do when he comes in? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? She doesn't have a plan because she was told you don't need a plan. If you just stay in your classroom, you'll be good. You don't need a plan
Right.
beyond stay in your classroom with a locked door closed. And there's people that are still getting told that today. Um, yeah, the schools love, love, love the lockdown, and they love buying stuff. So I go to these school conferences, and you probably know you have to pay as a attendee at a conference, but how they make their big money is selling the vendor booth space to all these
Hmm.
businesses that show up. And it's not all active shooter stuff. It's safety,
Yeah.
security stuff, but a
Yeah.
lot of it is buy our stuff, and your kids will be safe. And if you
Hmm.
believe that, you'll write the check, because who wouldn't want to
Yeah.
write a check for that?
Right.
So just out in Nashville, probably less than 6 months ago. Now this wasn't an active shooter; it was a kid that just went in to kill his girlfriend. But they had bought this system that I saw last summer in a school conference. It was an artificial intelligence gun sensors. It works through your pre-existing security cameras. And I
Mhm.
talked to that company. They put it in there and it immediately identifies a gun. And even if it worked, that just means it would probably get the cops there 15 seconds quicker than they otherwise would have. But
Right.
it when the kid pulled the gun and shot his girlfriend and shot himself, their $1 million gun sensing system didn't work. And a similar system, not the same company, that's also supposed to detect knives. There was a stabbing in Killeen, Texas, where I lived for 2 years at a high school, and their huge money system didn't detect it. So when they bought that and installed it, they probably thought we're safe,
Oh
we're
yeah.
safe. Uh, School district in northern Louisiana contacted me within a week after Uvalde, asked if I'd come down and work with them. Started with the high school. He's walking me around campus and he shows me what I call in the book super locks. They said they did research and found these really expensive door locks. They cost a lot of money, but nothing could defeat them. You couldn't shoot them. And they installed them on all their exterior doors of all their buildings on the high school campus, but they installed them on the cross beam of the door that has a big glass panel under the beam and a big glass panel above the cross beam. And he was showing me how much these cost and how
Hmm.
they rushed to get them bought and put in. Nothing can defeat these locks. And when I pointed and said, you don't think he would just shoot through the glass? And he just blinked at me. Because
But
again,
we locked the door.
they we bought the lock.
Hmm.
They have no, not bad people, not stupid people. They just have
Right.
no, and plus you're a high school, he's probably already in your building anyway.
Yeah.
but schools love to buy stuff and fill out forms. So threat assessments and all these other things, they
Hmm.
love to fill out these forms. We talked a little about church attacks, and then I go into other attacks, the Eli Dicken attack, the Fairchild one, and then I end the other attack session because it's a beautiful, well, it's not beautiful, but it's a perfect comparison of almost identical attacks that had hugely different results. The San Bernardino attack and the Garland, Texas attack. In both attacks, you had two attackers. Two. In both, the two attackers were motivated by radical Islam. In both attacks, both of those motivated shooters had rifles, and they both attacked a public place wanting to get a high victim count. San Bernardino got 31 victims, and the only reason it wasn't higher is they voluntarily quit early and left because they had to survive the attack. So they videoed their shooting on GoPros, and they had to survive so they could download the video and put it online. They got 31 in 3 to 4 minutes before they left. In Garland, the two shooters showed up with body armor and rifles, and they got one leg wound. They shot one victim in the leg before a 59-year-old cop drew his pistol and shot him both to death. Garland had a welcoming party, and that welcoming party was a 59-year-old cop that wouldn't let him do it. San Bernardino didn't have a welcoming party. They got 31. So it's almost a perfect comparison of everything was the same at both attacks, but the outcome was different because there was an immediate counterattack in Garland, Texas. Um, I go into the three plans, the three options for organizations, which I talked about: wait on cops, have a cop and wait on cops, or immediately fight back. The three options for individuals, which is fight, flee, and barricade, and fight should always, always, always be considered first, not done first. Everybody can't or won't do it. But the beauty of the active shooter attack is he doesn't go to a deserted place. He comes to a very crowded place. So out of the 50, 100, 300 people that are there are one or two that'll fight back. So let them and tell them beforehand, we want you to fight back. We only need one or two. We just needed Gina Som, Eli Dicken, Humberto Garcia, Vic Stacy, Greg Stevens. We just need one or two. So tell people to do that. I go into the boogeyman arguments, and this specifically is in the book. It's for armed teachers. Again, there's fault with everything. So they'll say, having guns on campus is a bad idea. Oh, really? Absolutely. You don't have an SRO. Oh, no, we have an SRO. You don't let the SRO carry a pistol? Oh, yeah, yeah, the SRO carries a gun. Oh, so guns
Hmm.
on campus, isn't it? And then the whole thing of, okay, you're going to be screaming for cops to come. Are you going to tell the cops not to bring their guns? No, you're not.
Right.
So guns is the solution. The only question is, do you want them here 15 seconds after the first shot or 4 or 5 minutes after the first shot? Um, School staff didn't have police training. Well, guess what? Sparky, they don't need police training. Eli Dicken, Humberto Garcia, Vic Stacy, all these people had no police training, and it worked out fine. Human shooting mammals is not a police task. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. It's called hunting. It's lining two things up, pulling a lever. That's not a police specific task. You know who did have decades of police training? The SRO at Parkland. That police training didn't seem to help. So there's a list of those to counter, because I get those there. I know when I go, I'm going to get those there. And then we go into a focus of school policy. And so I have a 1-page active shooter response plan for schools that I offer all schools. A 1 page is all you need. It is scary and terrifying, but it's not. It's really actually simple. And I've had schools with 50, 60, 90-page active shooter plans that no one
Hmm.
reads, on how to train their staff. Um, I go into, again, I go to all these conferences where everybody's selling every kind of possible thing to buy, when there's actually just very few things. I go into color coding their hallways so that it's easy for responders to find their way around. If they have a fire alarm, because fire alarms almost always go off because of the concussion inside of the building. If their fire alarm is a steady tone, they need to change that to one that's got, beep, beep, where there's no sound in there so you can hear the shooting and the screaming.
Hmm.
The playground, two things. One is build ballistic walls, build bulletproof walls in the middle of the playground and paint them pretty colors, about 4 foot high, paint them pretty colors so they're playground walls. But the purpose is we get on the side opposite of where we hear the popping and screaming, which won't stop the shooting, but it'll slow down greatly his ability to
Right.
get hits until we can counterattack. The other thing is we love these slogans: keep doors locked for safety, lock doors for safety, lock all doors. Well, not the door between the playground and the building during recess, or kids got nowhere to go. Because I've gone to schools and like, oh yeah, we enforce that, and the kids got to use the bathroom. The teacher goes and unlocks the door because we have to keep doors locked for safety. Not that door when the kids are on the playground. The cafeteria, the only thing I can think to do is to bulletproof the tabletops. And we teach the kids if the shooting starts in the cafeteria, which high schools, that's where they start. We flip the tables on their sides. Again, that won't stop the shooter, but it'll greatly slow down his hit rate. It gives the kids cover
Mhm.
to either hide behind or use cover to get to an exit and get away. And then bookshelves. Schools are full of bookshelves. And another word for bookshelves is ballistic protection. So instead of putting them where they're out of the way or convenient, we start putting them where they're most likely to stop bullets coming through our walls. Those are things I think can actually work. And I end with some questions that I would recommend that parents politely ask their school leaders, their superintendent, and their school board. Like, who is responsible for stopping an active shooter if he starts shooting our kids? If the answer is anything other than we are, you got a problem. If it's, well, the sheriff 8 miles down that way is responsible to stop, the SRO is responsible. If it's not we are, then we need to have more talking. How long will it take you to stop the active shooter once he starts? If they don't give you a solid number and that number is not 30 seconds or below, you got a problem. So I give them a set of questions they probably ought to ask.
Okay. Again, I can't go into some of the specifics of the local incident that happened last September. I will say that because this is public knowledge, SROs were on scene and they did respond and they did stop the incident after 4 deaths. Um, Now in Georgia, it's you got our legal system here. You actually have multiple layers of government, even at the local level. You have the county commission, which is the governing body for the county. And then the school board is a different elected board. And there's some certain things in the law that the schools are responsible for funding, that the county is responsible for funding, and some things they have to work together on, et cetera. Um, the county had been funding a portion of the bill for the SRS. The county just announced that they had informed the school system that they would no longer be spending the $2 million a year to fund the SRS because of a change in a different law on the revenue coming into the county. And that's where they decided they were going to cut the money.
So if a
Well,
school has an SRO, it will be from a city agency or they will pay out of pocket.
the school system is going to fund the SROs now. But they found out they had to do this by a letter from the county. It goes public, and then the school system is going to have to raise the millage rate for the taxes that it collects to now collect the $2 million to fund the SROs.
With school starting again in a month and a half or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how politically tone deaf. Now, I can agree with you on the numbers of, okay, SRO is, in this case, it worked. And I've been on the other side of this. I was, we're dealing with the whole political thing of whether or not to put SROs in the school in my previous job. We can argue all that, but how do you politically, when you just had deputies stop one, go, you know what, we're not going to fund this anymore?
They, the, how many active shooters have you had at the county commission?
Zero.
Yeah. See, and that's
Yeah.
another thing.
Yeah.
So
That I'm aware of.
yeah. So when I was a company commander, I was in charge of 80 guys and 14 tanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the top ranking guy, but I was commander of one of those tanks. And I had a sergeant and two privates on that tank. If my tank took a hit because of something bad I did or just bad luck, I paid the same price as that private paid.
Mm-hmm.
So even if I didn't care about my mission or my troops, I had skin in the game because I paid the
Right.
same price. Well, the problem is the
Yeah.
people who are making the decisions, the real decisions are
Yeah.
The government people and the school boards and the superintendents, they don't get shot at. The
Right.
principals and below get shot at. They're
Yeah.
paying the price, but the people that are making decisions don't
Right.
pay the price. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And the poor sheriff was caught here is if the county doesn't give him the money to fund these positions for these deputies to go be there, how does the sheriff do it?
I got to fire that many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just like, wow. Yeah.
And,
We just had an active shooter incident in the schools. The SROs stopped it. And now we're not going to fund it anymore.
and they didn't
Ah,
even work with the superintendents and the sheriff before they made the decision.
I don't know what all went on behind the scenes, but what was reported in the media was the county commissioners sent the school board a letter saying, we're not going to fund this. Well, okay. Now, the county commissioners blamed it on the citizenry for voting in a homestead exemption in the taxes or whatever, which meant they tried to claim that that said that the county couldn't spend money on the schools. And okay, that's simplifying the problem.
Yeah.
But okay. But that's just one of the political fights that gets involved in these decisions. People don't understand that. Is you actually have three entities involved in delivering this one service.
Yep. In a
And
lot of places, it's a
yeah,
memorandum of agreement. They will pay
right,
this much. They will pay this much.
right,
Yeah. And
yeah,
uh, when I attend these conferences, and I usually don't fly in, speak, and fly out. I'll fly in the day before. And when
mhm,
I'm not speaking, I'll attend other breakout sessions or other
yeah,
main speakers or whatever. And another theme I hear at the school conferences are, we have to do X, Y, or Z to keep our kids safe, or our
mhm,
job is to make sure our kids have a safe learning. And upset them when I tell them you cannot keep anybody safe. You cannot keep your kids safe. And it may sound like semantics, but it's not. You can do things to increase security. You can do things to lower risk. But what I tell them is, a year ago, Donald Trump was shot in the head. Now, at that time, he was a former U.S. president, which authorized him high end security.
mhm,
And he was one of the final two people running for president, which authorized him high end. He had federal law enforcement, state law enforcement, county and city law enforcement there before he got there, and he still got shot in the head. So I usually show the famous black and white photo of Lee Harvey Oswald getting shot point blank by Jack Ruby while he's surrounded by cops. So we can't do anything to keep our kids safe. Several SRO conferences on their logos, they have that, to keep our kids safe. Like, you can't keep your kids safe. You can increase security and you can lower risk. But that's just a different way of looking at it. You can't type something to keep your kids safe. You can't buy a product to keep your kids safe. There's very little you can do for someone pulling a gun out of their backpack or their waistline and shooting somebody.
right,
The big question is, how quickly can you stop it once it starts?
right. And the products that they buy may complicate things as well. I'm aware of an incident in which um, all of the law enforcement officers in a particular jurisdiction had key cards that would allow them to get into the schools through their security system. And when they actually had an incident and the school went on hard lockdown, it locked out the deputies' key card access to the schools, and they could not get into the building to respond.
Nationwide, I see the school does not want to give cops keys.
Yeah.
If they do, then I don't know, 6 months. Whenever they rekey they change the code in the electric fobs, or they rekey
Hmm.
the mechanical keys or the cards, they don't tell the cops. So the cops say, "Oh, I got a key.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
get it." But then when
Yeah.
something happens, it doesn't work. And
Yeah.
I don't understand a school's reluctance to give the
Yeah.
cops, especially the SROs, keys, because I mean
Yeah.
they've all got cameras now. If the cops go in there stealing stuff, they'll
Yeah.
catch him. I don't understand the
Yeah.
reluctance to do that.
Yeah. Well, in this instance, they had given all of the cops key cards. Like even the like the patrol cops all had key cards to get into the building. But when the school went on lockdown, it locked out the deputies' key cards.
And I'll go places,
Yeah.
SRO conferences. Oh, we all have keys, and I'm like, okay. On any given day, I wonder how many of
Yeah.
those will actually work. How many will
Yeah.
let you in? Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
one big company that sells computer program and apps for the phone, And one of the
Hmm.
things they say is if all your employees have this app, you can call cops really quick. Well,
Yeah.
even if it worked, what does that mean? You get the cops there 15 seconds earlier.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Uvalde, and they are major sponsors of many of these school conferences. And Uvalde had it, and it didn't help them.
Yeah.
But I bet when they bought it, they thought it would.
Oh yeah.
But I've seen some really wild.
Yeah.
People say we have drones. We have drones. How does a drone open a door? Oh crap, we didn't think about it. We just thought we'll fly the drone into the guy. Or what if? How are you going to get through closed doors?
Yeah.
They just want. They desperately want a nonviolent solution to an
Yeah.
extremely violent problem. Anything
Uh,
other than we have to be violent. That's
um, this has been several years ago, and I forget which incident it was. I have a distant cousin. I think we're fifth cousins, second removed, something like that. That I did not grow up with. Did not know him until we were both adults, and he was the sheriff, and I was chief deputy. Um, he is the sheriff of a rural county in Tennessee where they have an elementary school, a middle school, and a high school. And after one of them, he decided that he was going to go on this thing and was going to buy a product called Barracuda door jamb armor and put one in every classroom in his county. And the whole thing was to be able to, to lock the doors with this door jamb armor and everything else. And I contributed. I bought one unit to his campaign. The state fire marshal tried to block that plan because it said it would violate the fire codes.
so. What
And
I ask them, I say, did God write the fire code or did a man write it? So, oh, a man wrote it. Then we can change it, can't
yeah,
we?
yeah. Well, it's funny because genetics must be a real thing because he went full on Weems and he beat the fire marshal into submission and they
Good.
changed the plan. Um, so
Every.
nice. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It just amazed me because the PR thing that he ended up pulling off at the end of this thing, I was like, yeah, I could have written that for him, and it was just it truly was amazing, just the response to that. And I reached out to every school in which I had a family member attending, and I said, I will buy one unit per family member that I have attending your school if you will authorize them and you will open it up to let other people do the same thing. Crickets. Now, you and I both know that the things aren't going to stop it, but
Well, and
you know,
every hardening option is a double-edged sword,
mhm,
and we tend to like to only think of the good it could do for us. But
right,
there's
right,
several kinds of I've seen companies that have places to lock physically
mhm,
lock the door. The STEM school, one of our three school multiple shooter attacks. We had
mhm,
Columbine, Jonesboro, Arkansas, and the STEM school, two shooters.
yeah,
The 18-year-old, of course, a student of the school, when he went into the classroom, this was a magnetic thing you pulled and it locked the
mhm,
door. He went in the classroom and then pulled it. So that's the problem with having really good locking systems of the
yeah,
classroom doors. What if it starts in the classroom? Now,
yeah,
how hard is it going to be
yeah,
for cops and EMS to get in there?
yeah. In other words, it trapped the victims in there with them and
Yep.
slowed down the response to get there. Yeah,
Yep. And I've had somebody say, well, you know how when the
yeah,
fire alarm goes off, sometimes the magnets will undo, the doors will
mhm,
close. Well, we'll
yeah,
have a system with a panic button so it traps the active shooter and he can't move throughout the school. Well, what about the victim? You've just trapped the victims with him.
yeah,
They only think of the
yeah,
positive and not the negative.
yeah. The only solution is to actively stop the active bad guy.
That's what the cops are going to do.
Yeah,
They're just going to do it too late. So yeah, we
yeah,
know what works.
yeah,
It's not like we have a theory of maybe this could pop. We absolutely know what works.
right.
It's just that and then of course we have schools, churches, businesses, and everything, but they just don't
Yeah,
want to. They
yeah,
don't want to face what we have to do.
yeah. And I think you said this earlier in the show. These are often good people who think they are doing good things and the right things. And I don't want to get away from the fact or recognize they are good people that are trying to do good
Yep.
things. Some about school administrators and everything.
Yep.
It's just their mindset is not where it needs to be to solve this problem. Um, I responded to an incident at a school, and one of the assistant principals and another school administrator had ringed the entrance with rubber traffic cones. And then they told me that they did that so that the bad guy couldn't drive up to the door right there.
Those are some pretty dang good cones.
Yeah, we started referring to them as TCIDs, like we the deputies, which stood for traffic cones of instant death. And it became one of those jokes. I deploy the TCIDs to keep anybody from being able to enter here and everything. Now, they thought they were doing something.
Yep. Just like the super locks on the
Yeah,
doors, the glass
yeah,
doors. Well,
yeah.
I went to one school and it was the few days before the students showed up. And I had a teacher say, we still want to hear what you have to say, but what you need to know is we changed our dress code over the summer. So now the students can only use see-through backpacks. So there's no way they can bring a gun in the school. And then I show them how the Bethel, Alaska shooter student of the high school rode their bus to school and walked in the front office with a full-length 870 down the pants leg of his jeans. So
Yeah,
yeah, that see-through backpack is going to really, really work. But they want something. They want a
yeah,
thing, a policy, a product
yep,
that want so no one will have to be violent. And that's just
yeah. Yeah, under our state law, there was a position created that the schools all had to have like a safety person. And I'm aware of a local school system that hired the fire chief away from the fire department to come be their safety person. Now, this position was created mostly to deal with the active shooter thing. Well, he was a good fire chief. I don't know,
yep.
what his training and expertise was in stopping bad guys, but
That gets into we got to do something. So
got to
we
do
buy a
something.
product, we
Yeah,
appoint a new safety position, we
yeah,
create a new form that has to be filled out.
yeah,
Um, the last two big, I guess, Uvalde and Parkland, and it was two different governors, if I'm right, of
yeah.
my state of Arkansas, appointed a task force to study the active shooter problem and issue an official report. That
Well,
was
yeah,
what we did in response to it here.
that nobody will read.
Yeah, yeah. But by
Yeah,
God, we did something.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
we have 40 years of doing stuff. It's just nothing that'll actually help. So
Right.
the analogy I end my summary with is, we've all done this. You're outside somewhere and you pick up a trash can outside and there's cockroaches under it.
Yeah,
And they all start running and scurrying and you start stomping and you can't get them all, but you can get a lot of them because all they're doing
yeah,
is trying to keep from getting killed.
yeah,
Contrast that with you walking up to a wasp nest and thumping that thing.
yeah.
It's drastically different reaction. You immediately stop thinking about what you were going to do to the wasp and you're immediately concerned about what they're doing to you. And that's schools, churches, businesses, government offices have to stop being the cockroaches and have to start being the wasps.
There you go. There you go. Tell us about the Heroes Conference.
So, because I've been doing this pretty heavily for the last several years, I go to a lot of conferences, and I've had the honor, the absolute privilege and honor of meeting some of these heroes that were there, that were brave because they were there and they were brave. They stopped these shooters. So the four I knew the best, I asked first, and they all said yes. I wanted to, instead of having one or two, one at this conference, saw him again at this conference, saw him again at this conference. Why can't we get a bunch of them together? So my idea was one day, and to give them enough time because I know about how long they take. Again, the first four I asked. So Stephen Williford, three of them are from Texas. Stephen Williford would live three houses down from a Baptist church that got shot up. He got woken up out of a nap from his daughter, put pants on, got his AR-15, ran down the street and shot the guy. Um, Jack Wilson, most people, especially on your podcast, I'm sure, have seen the video of Jack Wilson in his church in White Settlement, Texas, who the active shooter pulled out a shotgun in service during communion, shot two people in less than 2 seconds. And Jack drew his concealed pistol and shot him through the head 2.3 seconds after the first shot of the active shooter, which I'm going to call a successful stop. Um, and then Greg Stevens, which you mentioned at that time, 59-year-old cop, uh, volunteered for extra duty, off duty at this huge public event. A car pulls up, two guys with body armor and rifles gets out, and he drew his pistol, walked towards them. He was about 15 yards when he started, walks towards them and shoots them both to the ground, killing both of them, even though they had rifles and body armor. And then Pastor David George pastors a small church outside of Olympia, Washington. He preached his Father's Day sermon a few years ago, then went with his family, about 4 of his family members, to Walmart, and an active shooter kicked off there. And only because he thought some of his family might be the next victims, he reluctantly pulled the Glock 19 he was carrying and shot the guy to death in the parking lot. So those 4 will come tell their stories. And then I hopefully we'll have enough time at the end. I'll have all 4 of them on stage and let the audience hit them with the questions, and I'll have some questions for them. I know Greg Stevens, the officer at Garland, Texas, and Pastor George. I know they both show videos and photos, and they
Mhm.
just don't talk about the attack. They talk about beforehand, some backstory on the shooter, details that most people have never heard. Then the after. How was I treated by my family, by my church, by my job, by the media,
Mhm.
by the prosecutor, by the cops, all that stuff. It's just, I've heard all of these guys multiple times, and I'll never pass up a chance. If I'm speaking at a conference on Thursday and Stephen Williford is speaking on a Tuesday, I'll fly in 3 days early just so I can hear him again. This is August 23rd, which is a Saturday. It's going to start at 9, end at 5, 2 before lunch, 2 after lunch, um, in Whitehall, my little city of Whitehall, Arkansas. So if you drive, we're about 30 miles south of Little Rock. If you're flying in, flying to Little Rock, LIT. And I'm selling tickets on Eventbrite. If you just Google Eventbrite Heroes Conference, Whitehall, Arkansas, I guarantee it'll take you right there. If you sign up for it, buy a ticket, you'll get an automatic email that'll have, there's 2 hotels we have a special rate with if you're far enough away that you're going to have to spend the night. Um, and anybody's welcome to contact me, and I can give them more information on it.
All right. I will put a link to both the conference and the book in the show description for this episode.
Okay, outstanding.
All right. How can people reach you?
My phone number, my only phone I have is my cell, Ed Monk, or my email address is edmonk@aol.com, EDMONK at AOL.com. Yes, AOL still exists and I still use it. My cell is 870-273-1113. And I've never had a website. We just kind of worked off Facebook because
Mhm.
I'm extremely low tech, but I got help and I now have a website for the book. It's first30-seconds.com. The word FIRST 30-seconds.com. And you can go there, learn more about the book, and it has a link to take you to Amazon, or you can just look on Amazon for First 30 Seconds. And I am number number 1 new release in schools and teaching right now. So happy
Oh,
about that.
cool. Cool. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Hopefully it will wake up some people that read it.
I'm hoping so. And I priced it pretty low. It's $19.99. I think it's actually on sale right now for $18.99. And the ebook, the Kindle book, is only like $3.99. Because I want to get it as many out there as I possibly can.
All right. Anything you want to say about the topic or the conference that I didn't ask you about?
No, if people in your website, if they contact me, have them
Mhm.
contact me and ask me for a discount code, and I'll shoot them a discount code.
All right.
And get them in. It's $149 right now. I'll make a discount code, make it $69. In fact, I can make one exclusively for you and your listeners and send it to you, and you can put it up,
Okay.
and they can get in for $69 a pop. Because I would love people to come to this,
Sure.
and listen. Listen to one of them is just amazing. Listen to all
Yeah.
4 of them is incredible. And 2 happened at a church by devout Christian men. One
Mhm.
happened not at a church, but by a pastor after church. The only one that wasn't church related at all was Officer Greg Stevens, but all
Right.
4 of those speakers will tell you God was with them when they did what they did. So
All right. Cool. Well, Ed, as always, I have enjoyed our conversation.
I appreciate you having me on, Lee. When will we see each other again? To TACCON or before?
Um, are you coming to the reunion in Nashville?
No, not this year.
TACCON's probably going to be it
All
then.
right. See you
Yeah.
at TACCON.
Yeah. Unless I can make it to Whitehall on the 23rd.
Love for you to come out. But now I've jammed myself now. That's all day on the 23rd,
Yeah.
Saturday, and I'm actually having a dinner with the
Yeah.
speakers that night. The next morning early, I fly uh, to Rhode Island to speak at the Rhode Island SRO conference, and then the next day out of there, I fly to New York for the New York's SRO conference.
Okay,
So
cool.
I'm going to have all that. I can't uh, lollygag. And one thing, my brother. So my brother is terminally ill with long
Oh,
range shooting. Long range shooting. We can't help him. All we can do is make him comfortable and let him shoot a lot of
mhm.
long range stuff. So he teaches long range rifle. And so somebody, can't remember who, I'm sorry, when we posted the Heroes Conference, they said, "Hey, if I'm coming all the way up there for one day, why don't you have your brother do a rifle class to make it worth me coming up there?" So he scheduled a rifle class on Sunday the 24th and on Friday the 22nd, the day before and after. There's a 1 day rifle class, and I'm pretty sure there's seats in both of them open, one or two in both of them. So if you want to come to the Heroes Conference and you want to do some long range rifle shooting, then you can do that as well. And that class is on Eventbrite as well. Contact me if you want details.
All right, cool, cool. Well, Ed, I appreciate your time, and to the audience, we know that your time is your most important asset. Thank you for choosing to spend it with us.
Thanks, Lee.